Take a moment and look at your finances as they actually are right now, not where you hope they'll be, where they really are. For a long time, I believed that if I made significantly more money, I'd finally feel secure. That belief kept me chasing the wrong solution for years. Most people think more money will solve their problems. I'm going to tell you something most men in my position are too proud to admit. Those zeros did not show up because I was smarter than everyone else. They showed up because I finally stopped lying to myself. I wasn't born into money. I wasn't protected by a trust fund. In fact, my middle years, the years no one talks about, were the hardest of my life. I wasn't young enough to dream recklessly anymore, and I wasn't successful enough to feel safe. I had a family to provide for, bills that never seemed to shrink, and a quiet fear that I had somehow missed my moment. I was barely getting by. On paper, I looked functional. In reality, I was drowning politely. Here's the first financial truth I had to learn, and it's not popular. Income is not the problem for most people. Behavior is. I didn't like hearing that. I wanted to believe I needed a raise, a better boss, a bigger break. But when I finally looked honestly at my finances, I realized something painful. Money came in and money disappeared, and I could never explain where it went. There was no plan, no structure, just hope. Hope is not a financial strategy. The turning point wasn't when I made more money. The turning point was when I decided to steward what I already had, as if God were watching, because He was. I built my first real budget in my late 30s. Not a vague mental one, a written one. Every dollar had an assignment. Scripture says the borrower is slave to the lender, and I felt that slavery every month. So I made a decision. No more pretending. I faced the numbers without emotion, without excuses. That's lesson number 1. Clarity precedes prosperity. If you don't know exactly where your money is going, you are not in control, no matter how much you earn. The second lesson was even harder. I had to kill lifestyle inflation. Every time I made a little more, I spent a little more. Nicer car, better vacations, small upgrades that felt harmless but kept me stuck. I realized I was trying to look successful instead of becoming successful. So I did something that hurt my pride. I lived below my means on purpose, not temporarily, intentionally. I drove the same car years longer than I needed to. I said no to things that impressed people who weren't paying my bills. This wasn't about deprivation. It was about margin. Margin is what gives you options. Margin is what allows you to invest instead of panic. Margin is what turns money from a source of stress into a tool. And here's where faith enters the conversation in a way most financial advice ignores. I started tithing consistently when it made no sense on paper. Not because it magically multiplied my money overnight. It didn't, but because it realigned my mindset. It reminded me that my security didn't come from my bank account. It came from obedience. It forced me to trust God instead of clinging to every dollar like it was oxygen. And something interesting happened. When I stopped worshiping money, I started making better decisions with it. The third lesson changed my life financially. I stopped trading time for money and started building leverage. For years, my income was capped by my hours. No matter how hard I worked, there was a ceiling. I realized that diligence alone would never make me wealthy. Diligence is necessary, but it's not sufficient. So I studied, quietly, consistently. I learned how businesses actually make money, not revenue, but profit. I learned how ownership works. I learned how cash flow differs from income. I learned why most people stay broke even with good salaries. And then I started small. Very small. My first investments were not glamorous. No headlines, no shortcuts, just boring, disciplined decisions made repeatedly. I reinvested instead of upgrading my lifestyle. I delayed gratification longer than my peers were willing to. That delay is where wealth is born. The Bible praises patience, but our culture mocks it. Everyone wants the harvest without the season of planting. But wealth compounds the same way faith does. Slowly, then suddenly. Another critical lesson. Debt is not neutral. I quote. I'm not talking about simplistic rules. I'm talking about spiritual weight. Every payment you owe owns a piece of your future. When I reduced my debt, I didn't just free up cash, I freed up mental energy. I could think clearly. I could take calculated risks. I could say no without fear. That freedom is priceless. Now let me say something very important. God did not make me rich because I was righteous. He made me capable of handling wealth because I became disciplined. Wealth is not a reward for holiness. It is a responsibility entrusted to those who can carry it without letting it corrupt them. As my assets grew, so did my accountability. Contracts became heavier. Decisions affected more people. Mistakes cost more. This is the part no one glamorizes. Riches amplify consequences. Which is why character must grow faster than capital. I stayed grounded by keeping my systems simple. I avoided investments I didn't understand. I ignored hype. I asked one question before every major decision. Does this align with my values or just my ego? That question saved me millions. Eventually, momentum built. Businesses scaled. Investments matured. Opportunities came looking for me instead of the other way around. But by then, money had lost its emotional grip on me. It was no longer my identity. It was a tool I knew how to use. And here's the final lesson I want to leave you with, especially if you're in that exhausting middle stage of life. Your current season is training, not punishment. The years I was barely getting by taught me restraint. They taught me humility. They taught me systems. Without those lessons, wealth would have destroyed me. If you are faithful with little, Scripture says you can be trusted with much. That's not poetic language. It's practical reality. So, start where you are. Track your money. Live below your means. Avoid unnecessary debt. Invest patiently. Build skills that scale. Honor God first, not last. And stop waiting for a future version of yourself to be disciplined. The habits you build now are the ones that will determine whether 6 extra zeros bless you or break you.